Hello, I'm Mark Tucker.
Hey, I'm Alan Furstenberg. Welcome to Two Voice Devs.
Two voice devs. Hey, Alan.
Hey, Mark. Having a good week?
I'm having a pretty good week. Yes.
Good. Always good when we have good weeks. Feeling accomplished, getting stuff done.
Yeah, that's true. And one of the things I've been thinking about, or actually getting to do a lot recently, is mentoring. So it's great
Mm.
when you get to accomplish things, but it's also kind of fun to see other people grow and learn and expand in their skill sets and their abilities, both technical and non-technicals.
And part of the reason why that's important, let's remember, is that that also means that you can grow and improve your skill set and move on to bigger and better things, either in the company or outside
Yep.
of the organization you're with right now. But in order to do that, you need to have somebody who can do your job.
Exactly.
People don't necessarily always have a good idea on what we mean when we say mentoring. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's interesting because there could be lots of different scenarios where mentoring happens, and there could be kind of more of a light touch mentoring and
Mm.
kind of more an official mentoring. So I'm kind of both sides of either of those situations. You could have, for example, mentoring could be a brand new junior developer that's coming in that's new to not only the company but the field that you're in. Maybe it's somebody that's more advanced, but a code base or a programming language that they don't, and it's bringing them up to speed on that situation. Or it could just be somebody that's struggling a little bit and needs a little bit of an extra help. So it could be something that you make sure that you're available, and you're whenever interact with somebody, you're inviting them to come and talk to you, and you're asking questions. So that's kind of more of a light touch. Or you could be scheduling something on a regular basis where you touch base with somebody and go through progress of different things. I don't know. That's kind of my experience. What type of experiences have you had?
I actually haven't done a lot of formal mentoring.
Hmm.
Um, and I've been mostly well, I mean, I guess some of it is how you define it. So
Yeah.
I've been largely on the receiving end of professional mentoring. People who have been making suggestions in my career path or how to work through a particular job or in a particular company. And I guess some of that actually has been formal, but I guess in some ways, I have a lot of people asking me as I'm doing presentations and as I'm
Hmm.
going to conferences and as I'm talking to people in conferences. I get a lot of people right out of school saying things like, how do I get into this field or that field, or where do I go, or what, how do I make this my career, or whatever. And I don't know, I guess in a way that's sort of mentoring. I mean, in some cases it is. um, I feel like one of the key things to me is that a mentor is sort of the person who is there for the long term for you. It's not,
Yeah.
they're not handing out advice. They are there so that, when you encounter rough spots, you can come back to them and say, here's what I'm seeing. What's your advice?
Yeah.
Where
And
where do I go?
instead of a single or a few experiences, it's a more of a long-term relationship, right?
Yes. At least that's how I see it.
Yeah. But you had mentioned conferences. I do see some aspects um, of mentorship being done in a presentation. For example, people typically attend your presentation because you've got some skill or knowledge that they're interested in learning more about.
Mm.
And um, as you're preparing for your presentation, you're trying to think about who your audience is and maybe different ways that you can approach it, and how much background do you have to pull into it? Like, how much do you have to ramp them up on a concept, or do you just jump right in? Or
Well, and maybe we don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but how does mentoring in that case differ from education or training or skill boosting, or I don't know. What is there a difference? And if so, what is the difference?
yeah, and I think to me, we had touched on it before. Is it more? It's more of an attitude and more of a relationship. It's more like, hey, you've got somebody here that you can rely on.
Mm.
that if you've got a question, come and ask. If you're need a second set of eyes, if you need some help ramping up on a new concept, a new framework, a new project, something. The person that you're teaching could be somebody that's junior or somebody that's experienced, and there could be a situation where they know something that you don't, and the tables might be flipped. But I really see mentoring is about forming a relationship and
Yes.
and building a level of trust. And part of it is there's patience involved, obviously. There's also time that's required to set aside to mentor and to take that time, but it's also getting to know the person to a level to better understand how they receive or understand or process things, so that you can better adapt the message. And it's also looking out for areas where you're talking about something and you might see someplace over there that they don't understand. I had a situation with an intern once where they were coming in brand new. They didn't really have a lot of coding experience. Obviously some in school, but nothing in a practical sense, and they didn't understand the basic concepts of HTTP being request response or
Hmm.
status codes or things like that. Now, this is a number of years ago, um, but still, it's something that I understand it better because I grew up when the internet came out and started programming. I've had
Right.
lots of years that's I just kind of evolved, and it's part of this knowledge base that I have in my head,
I,
right? But
I
somebody
think
else
I,
jumping in doesn't necessarily know that.
I think a similar thing is, you're going to have a person who is coming in and they're not necessarily going to understand concepts like version control or release management
Yep.
or DevOps, or a bunch of things that I'm not sure I could even necessarily explain or define, but it's just part of how you do things, what you
Yeah.
need to do in order to get the job done. And that's a little different than what a formal education might have taught you, or even an
Yeah.
informal education. If what you're doing is, you're writing your own code and you're just doing it yourself, you may be familiar with Git and GitHub, but you don't necessarily understand how to use it as part of a team.
Yeah. We're branching in this certain way and we're naming it and we're attaching it to this ticket in Jira. And in this case, it's a story. And in this case, it's a technical debt. And, there's just, lots of different things that you may not necessarily know how to interact with, the
With the
tools. And sometimes you're in a situation, maybe if you're a more senior programmer, you might be put into a situation, especially if you're doing something like contracting for somebody else, that you might need to jump in there and learn a whole bunch of stuff really quickly, and then turn around and make sure that everybody else is up to speed. So it could be documentation that you write, it could be sessions that you have, it could be one-on-one pairing on things.
right. So what kinds of mentoring have you been doing recently? What's prompting this thinking?
Oh, okay. Well, it's just here at Rain, I've just had a number of opportunities over the 4 years that I've been here to do that. It could be training somebody. I had more experience on Jovo and creating Alexa skills, and so I was able to work with one of my coworkers who knew nothing about Jovo to walk them through, and in just a matter of a few weeks, understand Jovo and then understand how we're using Jovo in a project, and then be able to start contributing to the project. And so it really turned into a teaching them about a framework to teaching them about the project and how the framework is being used on the project, to giving them tasks to complete to prove that they've kind of understood different
Hmm.
concepts and meeting back, to pretty soon they're taking over a part of the project, to they're taking over the whole project. And so it's really satisfying to see somebody grow from knowing nothing. A month and a half ago they knew nothing about this thing, and now they're very proficient at getting around in the code, and they're asking the right questions. And so your conversations turn from like, this is how you do this, to the what do we think about how are we going to approach this problem. And pretty soon you've got a peer that you're communicating and talking with, as far as how to tackle a problem, as opposed to I'm only sharing and they're only learning, right?
This reminds me of a post by somebody that I've I feel like I've known for ages. Stacy Davino, who is, if you have not seen some of Stacy's work on Android, it's amazing stuff. She is always out there and always helping the community. She posted something the other day though that was along the lines of nobody cares how many people you had to ask for help to get it done. We only care that it got done.
Yes, exactly.
And Mike Wolfson, who we've had on the show in the past, followed up on that and saying, and the sooner you ask people, the better, because it's fine to try to work something out, but if you are struggling, you're wasting time that you could be doing, putting to better use. So ask people, look for that help. Help is a good thing. Working together as a team is a good thing. That's why we have teams.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're a team lead, then it's really a big part of your responsibility to communicate that message early. That
Right.
I'd rather you sure, try to work on it on your own, but if you get to a point where you're blocked, then ask for help, and I'm available to help. Just ping me
And,
on
and
Slack or whatever, right?
right. And I think it's important to make sure that you actually live up to that,
Yeah,
that you're available to help your junior engineers, your other engineers, um, do get past those barriers, solve the roadblocks. One of the things that one of my bosses said a long time ago, actually it was a boss and mentor, said a long time ago, was that their job was to make sure I could do my job. That was their first and highest priority. And if that meant clearing roadblocks, it was clearing roadblocks. If
yep,
that meant blocking their boss from coming down on me directly, that's what it meant. That's what you as a mentor, that's what you're there for,
yeah.
is helping is helping everyone else succeed. And if everyone has that mentality, it's a great thing.
There's lots of different approaches to mentoring, and like you said, that we have to you have to be available when they do ask, and everybody has a bad day, and sometimes they're like in the middle
Yeah.
of doing something, and but you need to also try to approach that situation where you are focused when you are working with them, and that you um, are able to put whatever feelings of stress or deadline or whatever behind you, so that they don't get this feeling like, yeah, he said he was available, and
But
then it feels like no, he's not really. He's grumpy at me, right?
right, you don't want people to feel like they're a burden.
Yes, exactly.
No, that's a good point. That's important. So all of this kind of reminds me of an anecdote that I've told before, kind of about mentoring, and it was when I was a very very young lieutenant in the Air Force. I had just started a project. We had HTML and this web stuff was just on the scene,
Mm,
and I was really really excited about doing this project for my unit in the Air Force. And so I had come up with the proposal and the design and a whole bunch of stuff, and I was ready to dive into it. And they said, yeah, you really should work with this other gentleman, and he'll help you with it. And this gentleman was a civil servant. He was retired Air Force, so he had been in the Air Force for a number of years and then retired and was a civilian working for the Air Force. He had decades of what we would now call institutional knowledge.
mm,
So he knew the mission, he knew the concept, but what he didn't know was HTML or this web stuff. And I was this lieutenant that was only a couple of years out, and thought I knew everything. And he came to me and said, so, what do you want? What do I do? How do I do it? And I said, yeah, you need to learn HTML and this web stuff. And he said, okay, where can I learn this? And I'm like, oh, just, go on the web and find it, because that's how I learned it. And I
right.
just kind of said, go figure it out. And he said, okay. And the next day I was told he had resigned.
Oh, yeah.
And that hit me. Here was a person who had decades of knowledge that I could have learned from,
Hmm.
knew things about how the unit operated, how people worked that I certainly didn't have the experience of. And I was in too much of a rush to properly mentor him on this technology he had never seen before. A couple of years back now at Voice Lunch, we had a session on the biggest mistakes we ever made in our careers, and that was mine. Without a doubt, that was my biggest mistake.
Yeah. Remind me, did you have, had you worked with him before? Was there a relationship
It
built
was a
there, or?
it was a modest relationship. We were both in the same division. We both reported to the same boss, and he was the one that put us together on this small team. And at the time, they were big on making these three, 2, 3 person teams to do stuff. So that was pretty normal. But I hadn't worked on a team much before, and I certainly had never run a team before. And I was just gung ho excited about this project.
And you were focused on kind of the project, the technology, the things that you would get to do, and you maybe
Yeah,
didn't spend enough time trying to make sure, kind of figure out where your coworker was at and
exactly.
what they needed to do to get to A to B to C so that they could be a contributor and be excited about the project too.
Exactly. It's a cautionary tale for everyone else out there. These people are part of your team. If you are, especially if you are a senior person, you need to work with them. And
Yeah.
that's kind of the lesson of mentorship that I hope I learned, and I hope I did better after that.
Yeah, and some people would say, well, it's on him. He didn't ask questions, and he didn't, this and this and okay, sure, yeah. But if you're in charge, if you're this, the senior person that's um, bringing forth this new technology or a new project, you bear responsibility too to make sure that your team is all on board and you understand concerns and you can move forward. Um,
Exactly.
that
And
that's just being a good teammate.
especially for a brand new technology, I mean, nowadays we would say, yeah, go Google it. There was no Google then.
Yeah,
There was barely a Yahoo then. There was barely anything then. And, so you did rely on other people to help discover the answers and point you in the right direction. And I didn't.
yeah. Well, yeah. That's Thanks for sharing that. I know it's probably it's influential to you for the mistake that you made, but it's also kind of hard to talk about stuff you know that you're like,
Yeah.
well, that's just not something. That wasn't my proudest moment for sure.
No, it definitely was not.
Yeah,
Anyway,
but
on.
thanks for sharing that. One of the things that I try to do frequently is be gracious with, you know somebody might come in and it's like, that's, it's a dumb question, and I reinforce, well, it sounds like a question I might have asked too. Or making sure that they feel like that what they're feeling isn't necessarily, it's not just all them and it's their problem and it's their fault. And there's, different people are different, temperaments, but some people are a little on the extra anxious side, and sometimes I tend to be on the extra anxious side as well. And I try to be
Mhm.
cautious of that and others. And if somebody comes back and says, "Oh, this is taking longer," then we talk about why it's taking longer, and if there's something that they need. And I try to make myself available, but I also ask them, is there something that you need? Is there anything that you need from me right now? Is there anything I can do to help you get to the next step? It could also be setting small goals. I try to encourage people to find what's the here's the bigger task, but what's the first win? Can you accomplish something in the next 10 minutes that's improvement that you can say, hey, that's a win. And sometimes I even like stop and say, all right, we're going to take a second and we're going to celebrate this win. And they're kind of like this. I'm like, just think about it, because sometimes you do lots of little things and you make steps, but there's always some other problem to solve or something bigger around the corner. And it's important to take a moment to acknowledge the accomplishment. Like today, we moved something on the task board to done. I'm like, woohoo, celebrate.
Oh, that's awesome. It's
Yeah,
great when you get stuff done.
yeah, because you're like, hey, we did it. Because it's so easy to move it to done and say, okay, the next thing I'm working on is this, and one of the things that's helpful or have been helpful in different situations with me is that I schedule a regular time every day. It could be a 30-minute time slot and say, all right, this time I'm focused on just you. So come with your questions. You can show progress that you've made. You can bring up troubles that you're having with something, complications. It could be a time for a demo and a celebration of progress. But it's scheduling in actual time to mentor and say, I'm available other times, and definitely if you get stuck between that, then let me know. But they know that
Mhm.
there's a set time where they can come back and show progress, and it does become a time where they're stretching and they're trying to make progress to show the progress that they've made and ask questions. So that's something that's worked for me, is just a dedicated regular 30-minute daily block, and in some cases that is just dedicated to whatever the person wants to talk about, or any struggles that they're having, or clarification of tasks that they have on what to do next.
One of the things that you talked about a little bit ago that that I thought was really good and really resonating was, in the process of mentoring somebody and stepping them up bit by bit by bit. One of the difficult things there is to make sure that you've got that task for them to do,
Hmm.
to get them into. So, if you're getting them into a new code base, make sure you've got a bunch of little tasks for them to do, so they can, just start with, I now know how to check out the code repository. I know how to
Yep.
make a fix, you know, small fix. It's things like change the value from 2 to 3. Doesn't have to be big,
Yep.
but there are always lots of little things like that are in the code that you as a mentor need to be prepared for. And I feel like that's also kind of the bigger message is that as a mentor, you need to be able to say, okay, here's where you are now, here's where you need to be, here's what's next.
Yeah.
Not, oh, yeah, you need something to do. Yeah, we'll find something.
Yeah.
Why don't you go look at the code and find something? You know,
Yeah.
you need to be prepared. That's, it's not, mentoring is work.
It,
It's
it is, and,
real.
and there's time behind the scenes. There's the time that you're meeting with them, but there's also time behind the scenes trying to think through where they're at, what they need next. Um, I had a situation recently where somebody was in a brand new code base. It was actually a brand new thing that they were doing. They were typically in one area and they were trying something in another area, and we found that they get a little over anxious when somebody was like right there, and I try to be very gracious and like, no problem, this is low stress, no mistakes, things like that. But sometimes
Hmm.
people are like, oh. And so I wrote up a list of tasks and questions and said, okay, here's the code base, here's the questions, let's talk about them tomorrow. And so and some of those things they put on there, I definitely thought, well, I think he might not know, this is brand new. What if I was brand new, what would I not know? And so I tried to write things down. It was like, one of them was as simple as, tell me a status code for when you do this type of request. And then that came back with the questions like, I don't know where to find status codes. I'm like, okay, well, what tool are you using? I don't know. What tool should I use? Well, let's look at and so I'm like, but then like 2 or 3 days later, he's navigating around the code base. He's showing me different things that he's done. He's got a plan for what we need to fix next, and I'm just like, that's exactly what I expected to happen. And he there was a little apprehension going into it, like, oh, this is brand new, I don't know any of this stuff. And I'm like, see, look over the last couple of days, look how much you've been able to pick up. And and then I also asked Gage, like, how confident are you in this? Is there anything else that you need to know?
I think the follow on to that, or the flip side of that,
Yeah.
perhaps, is you also need to be able to show that you may not know what answer.
Yeah.
Certainly as we're venturing into new stuff, as when we started with voice, as we're moving into LLMs, there's going to be lots of things that nobody knows, and maybe you're a step ahead of everybody else,
Yeah.
and maybe you're not.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to say, well, I don't know. Here's my guess. Here's where I might look. Or, I don't know the answer to this and I can't really look it up right now. But maybe if you go look here, here, and here, that might be a good starting place to find an answer. And if not, come back and let's see if we can find a better place. Or go try to find a better place and let me know so I can learn too.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, exactly. I had an experience early on where I got stuck on something, and one of many women mentors that I've had. Fortunately, in the programming area, I've been fortunate. I don't know that everybody has had as many opportunities as I had, but she came up and she was like, she jumped over into this other part and did this and this and this and like try this, and it worked. And I was just like, oh my gosh, she knows everything. But now, flip side, I know that there's some things that I know because I've done before, and um, but I do whenever I like I don't know this or this is how much I know, and this is the next thing I'm need to try to figure out. So I'm just a step ahead of you. It's okay to let them know that you're mortal. And there's certain things that and different preferences that you have for things, and just kind of um, make
right.
it a really a safe space as possible.
And certainly when we're dealing with new technology, everyone is new at this. Nobody's got
Yeah,
all the answers. We're all exploring it.
exactly.
So, as you say, you need to be vulnerable. You need to be able to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
So we've talked a lot about mentoring from the perspective of the person that's mentoring, but what advice, what things would you give to people that are in need of mentoring or want to be mentored, or who are approaching that situation? What would advice would you give them?
I feel like the first thing is you need to, as we talked about a few minutes ago, you need to get over the idea that you have to do it yourself.
Yep.
You have to be, you have to get yourself used to the idea you are going to talk to somebody and ask for help. You may not use those exact words, but that's what it is. Fundamentally, you are asking somebody for help, or they are offering you help, and you need to be open minded enough to receive it
Yeah.
and receive it in the spirit that it is intended.
Yeah, it's not a sign of weakness to ask for or accept help when offered, and it's okay. Sometimes we have to get comfortable with the idea that we need help. But what's interesting, what I've found, especially with these regular meetings that I've had, there's some days that it's a 5 minute meeting. They're like they have a couple questions, like tick tick tick. Okay, I'm ready to go.
Yeah,
And that's all it takes, and I'm like, great, that is exactly, some days it's, I need 40 minutes instead, or let's reschedule something else for a little bit later on in the day, um, to do a check back or something. But yes, exactly, be willing to help, be willing to accept help and swallow any like pride or ego, or and I actually try to use words like pride or ego and say, hey,
that's
no
yeah.
ego here, no pride. Everybody, sometimes I need help. Everybody needs help from time to time. So I'm offering. I'd love to help you. Please let me help you.
And it's interesting. People do get very, very defensive
Yeah,
about bugs in their code.
yeah,
And I've tried to get past it. It's not my code.
yeah.
It's our code.
It's our code. Yep.
And I can take pride in contributing to our code,
Mhm.
but it is our code. All of us are working on this.
Yes.
And that's good. That's okay.
Any other advice?
No. I really think it just kind of comes down to some fairly small and simple things
Yeah,
of, be both generous in what you are giving and what you're receiving.
yeah,
That's yeah, that's a
yeah.
that's a big lesson in general.
I think that is a big lesson in life, and it definitely does apply. Um, it applies in this situation as well. So yes, be appreciative of the help that you received. Um, you don't have to be overly so. It's not like you're thanking them every minute of, every time that you meet. Um, but generally have an attitude of appreciation. And I'd say one of the things is a willingness to learn, to be open to learning new things, to doing it differently than um, than you've done it before, and
Yeah.
because you're probably going to learn something. It may not be the way that you typically do it, or it may not be the way that you ultimately end up doing it, but you're going to learn something.
Yep.
So I think that's helpful to have patience on both sides of the relationship, to be honest and say, hey, I'm not feeling this, I don't understand this, can we go back, what's explain that part again, maybe differently, or so it's a communication, it's a back and forth communication. And I think as we do that and we're patient with each other over time, and we gain more and more experience being coworkers on this situation, then the level of trust increase, and it
Exactly.
lowers the anxiety of the situation, and um,
It
hopefully
hopefully
do good
becomes more
work.
natural. Right.
Yeah, it
It
does.
hopefully becomes more natural that you can talk to each other about these things.
Yeah, exactly.
Agreed.
So yeah, so I really enjoy it. I saw a post on Twitter/X recently about, I'm a senior developer and I don't want to mentor somebody. It wasn't on my job description. I just want to code. And
That's sad.
I'm like that's true. It's not on your job description. In fact, I've very rarely had mentoring others as a job description for something that I've applied to, but I enjoy it. I feel like it's a great opportunity to raise the quality of the team together, the trust and efficiency of a team. Um,
You know, I get the attitude though of, as we get more senior, we kind of start to miss the fact that, oh, I'm doing less and less coding, and that's what I really enjoyed.
yeah,
Um, I get that. On the other hand, I also think about how, if you really want to get into this kind of mentality, you can start thinking of it as, this is a craft, and we are handing down lore of our craft from one generation to another.
yeah,
And this is the opportunity for you to make your mark on the next generation.
yeah. I like that. Yeah, I do like the idea of a craftsman and skills, and it's not just coding skills or DevOps skills or whatever. It's also, how do you work in a team? How
Right.
do you foster a good team dynamic? Um, yeah, and I do understand people that might not be want to be bothered with that. And I've had opportunity to be a development manager before, and I've often turned it down because I like to be in the depths of the code and the tech and the figuring out solutions to problems. I don't know. I might end up my whole career as a senior architect, team lead, and I think I might be perfectly happy doing that because I have an opportunity of getting in, solving problems. I get to design things. I get to work with other team members. I get to see them grow. I get to learn new things. So I don't know. That's kind of what's worked for me. Well, Alan, I've really appreciated this opportunity just to kind of talk back and forth about mentoring in general, and just how much I enjoy it. I hope you can
Yeah.
tell that it's something that's important to me, and that it's something that I enjoy doing. So hopefully other people can learn a few things from what we've talked about. But we would also love to hear some of your perspective, whether you're somebody that's mentoring others and that's something that you do occasionally, or a lot more. Kind of what tips and tricks you have for that, or those who are approaching a mentoring opportunity and wanting to learn, or questions that you have. We'd like to hear from anyone who wants to talk more about this topic, and we could probably talk more about it on a future episode of Two Voice Devs.
Two voice devs. Have a great week, Mark.
All right, thank you. You too, Alan.